My dad called me at midnight with a voice I didn't recognize, shaking broken on the edge of something I couldn't name. "Don't go home. Stay where you are." That was all he said. No explanation. No hesitation. And when I asked him why, when I begged for a single reason, he whispered one thing that still haunts me. "Please, trust me." 10 minutes later, police cars were surrounding my streetlights, exploding across the houses like the whole neighborhood had been ripped open. And just like that, the life I thought I understood was gone. What happened that night didn't just scare me. It changed everything I believed about safety, about family, about the people who watch us when we think we're alone. But before I share my story with you, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hi in the comments so I know you're listening, or let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far my story can reach. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. If stories like this matter to you, if hearing the truth from someone who lived through it means something, please consider subscribing. It helps more than you know. My name is Daxon Lyle, and this is the night my father saved my life. My name is Daxon Lyle. I'm 31. And for most of my adult life, I've tried to live quietly, efficiently, and without drawing attention. It's a habit that stuck with me after years serving in the Marine Corps, where routine wasn't just discipline, it was survival. Since leaving the service, I've worked as a maintenance engineer at Lincoln Regional Airport in Nebraska, a job that's predictable, technical, and far calmer than anything I faced overseas. A year ago, I bought a small house in Crescent Hill, a quiet neighborhood where porch lights burn softly through the night, and the loudest thing you hear after dark is a dog barking 3 streets over. It was the first place that ever truly felt like mine. But even in peaceful places, small things start to break the illusion long before you notice. My porch light began flickering every few nights, even after I replaced the bulb. A couple of objects around my living room seemed slightly out of place after late shifts, like the remote angled differently or a coaster nudged to the side. Once my security camera sent me a motion alert, but when I opened the app, there was nothing but static. And then Harper, my ex, texted me out of the blue to say she'd had a dream where someone was watching me from my backyard. I told her she was reading too much into things. Or maybe just missing us. I convinced myself none of it mattered. The night everything shifted, I had just finished a grueling shift at the hospital hangar and left work at 11:45 p.m. The kind of cold Nebraska night where the air feels heavy and the sky is drained of color. The roads were empty. I pulled into the Casey's station near Highway 2 to top off my tank before heading home, already planning to take a hot shower and collapse into bed. That's when my phone rang. It was my father, Sean Lyle, a retired police chief, a man who never panicked. A man who believed fear was useful only when it was controlled. But his voice wasn't controlled that night. It trembled. It cracked. "Daxon," he said, "don't go home. Stay where you are. Please, just trust me." I froze with my hand still on the pump. "What, Dad? What are you talking about?" He inhaled sharply. "There's no time to explain. Do not go home. Do you understand?" In all the years I'd known him, I had never heard fear like that. Not when he held a dying man in his arms, not when he testified in court against someone dangerous, not even the day he found out my mom wouldn't recover. This was different. This was panic. I opened my mouth to ask what was happening, but before the words came out, I heard something slam against his door hard. A deep bang, like someone pounding with their whole body. Then the line cut. My chest tightened. I stood in the cold gas station air palms, sweating despite the temperature. Something was wrong. Not just with me. With him too. I hadn't even finished processing the call when sirens erupted behind me. 3 police cruisers flew past the station lights, flashing, heading straight toward Crescent Hill. My street. My home. The place where I should have been sleeping. Instead, I stood rooted to the concrete, watching those lights disappear into the darkness, every instinct inside me screaming that whatever waited in my house wasn't supposed to find me tonight. A chill knifed down my spine, the kind that doesn't fade, the kind that tells you your world has just cracked open. I stayed inside my truck at the gas station, engine idling, watching those police lights vanish toward Crescent Hill like they were being pulled to the center of something catastrophic. I kept hearing my father's voice in my head, strained, uneven, nothing like himself. Part of me wanted to ignore him and drive straight home, prove everything was fine. But another part, the part shaped by the Marines, shaped by nights when hesitation meant death, kept my hands glued to the steering wheel. If he said not to go home, there had to be a reason. I tried calling him back. Once, twice, 10 times. Each call rang until it died. I sent messages. Nothing delivered. I felt something I hadn't felt since Afghanistan, the creeping certainty that something had already gone very wrong. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, breathless. She told me Dad had rushed out of the house minutes earlier after receiving a text message he didn't show her. She said he didn't even grab his jacket, just the keys, and the look on his face scared her more than anything she'd seen in their marriage. My younger sister Willa called right after she'd seen Mom's missed call and panicked. She told me Dad looked like he'd seen a ghost when he ran out. Neither of them knew what was happening, only that he had repeated one instruction over and over: Daxon cannot go home tonight. My pulse hammered harder. If he wasn't answering, if he'd left the house in that state, maybe he wasn't safe either. I dialed him again, straight to voicemail. Then my phone rang. Not my dad. My neighbor, Mrs. Kate. She lived 3 doors down, the type who noticed everything but rarely exaggerated. "Sweetheart," she said, voice trembling. "I didn't want to worry you earlier, but did you come home tonight?" "No," I said. "Why?" "Because about 20 minutes ago I saw someone walking behind your house. I thought it was you at first. But then I heard something down in your basement. It sounded like furniture scraping. Are you sure you're not home?" A cold, delayed understanding swept through me. My father's warning, the police cars rushing toward Crescent Hill, and now someone inside my house. This wasn't coincidence. This was a pattern, a deliberate one. My hands shook. I gripped the wheel to steady myself and looked toward the distant glow of blue and red flashing through the sky. I drove toward the neighborhood but stopped as soon as I reached the police barricade. From where I sat, I could see Crescent Hill lit up like a crime scene. Officers moved with weapons drawn, shouting commands I could hear even from across the street. "Hands up, drop it." Move back from the doorway. My stomach twisted. Something was unfolding inside my home. Something violent, something planned, and I would have walked straight into it if I hadn't stopped for gas. If my father hadn't called. I sat there, breath shallow, realizing he had saved my life without telling me why. And whatever the police were shouting at, whoever they were confronting, had been waiting for me, and I had never felt further from safe. The longer I sat in that gas station parking lot, the more the uncertainty clawed at me. I couldn't stay still anymore. I needed to see what was happening with my own eyes. I drove toward Crescent Hill with my heart pounding so hard it felt like the steering wheel vibrated with it. As soon as I turned onto my street, I was stopped at a barricade nearly 200 meters from my house. An officer held up a hand and the glow of red and blue lights flashed across his face as he approached my window. From where I'd stopped, I could see my home swallowed in white beams from floodlights, the kind they use in major raids. 6 patrol cars boxed the property and blocking every angle. Officers crouched behind vehicles with weapons drawn, others moved along the perimeter with shields up. The quiet street I'd chosen specifically because nothing ever happened there now looked like the front line of something ugly. I tried to step out of my truck, but an officer immediately stopped me. He asked for my ID, studying it carefully before his expression tightened. Once he confirmed I was the homeowner, he didn't soften. He just told me I had to stay back. "The situation inside hasn't been cleared yet," he said. "Do not approach." I pressed for answers, but he didn't give any. His eyes told me enough, though whatever was going on wasn't small, wasn't random, and wasn't something they wanted me anywhere near. Then I saw him. A man being dragged out of my house through the back door. He fought against the officers, gripping his arms, twisting like an animal caught in a trap. His face stayed in the shadows, but I could see the frantic way he scanned the street as if he were trying to find someone. Someone specific. A sensation poured through my chest, cold and sharp. Whoever that man was, he wasn't a burglar looking for quick cash. Everything about him screamed intent. One of the officers near the barricade approached my window again. His jaw was tight as he studied my face. "You're lucky you didn't go home," he said quietly. "You need to sit tight and let us finish." Then he walked away without another word, leaving me with more questions than answers. I leaned forward, trying to see between the officers moving in and out of my home. Another one came up from the basement door, carrying a large plastic storage box sealed shut. He set it on the tailgate of a police truck, snapped it open, and stepped back as if he didn't want to touch whatever was inside. When he lifted the lid for the supervising officer, I felt the breath leave my body. Photographs. Dozens of them. All of me. All taken from angles I never noticed. Some through windows, some from across the street, some inside my own house, my own living room, my hallway, my kitchen. I stared so hard my vision blurred, trying to understand how long someone could have been watching me without me ever sensing it. An officer approached me again, his tone darkening. "There are items in your basement indicating this man wasn't working alone," he said. "Someone else may have been in and out before tonight." That sentence rooted me in place. I wasn't dealing with one intruder. Someone had been inside my house more than once. Someone had lived in the shadows of my daily routine. Someone had studied me, tracked me, picked their moment. And suddenly the flickering porch light, the shifted objects, the camera glitch, all the small warnings I ignored felt like pieces of a puzzle I should have solved long ago. I finally understood that what happened tonight wasn't the beginning. It was the moment everything that had been building for weeks, maybe months, finally broke open. After the initial chaos settled, the officers moved me farther from the house to take a preliminary statement. Under the harsh glow of their portable lights, they asked about my work schedule, how predictable my routines were, whether I lived alone, and if anyone had recently expressed unusual interest in me. When I mentioned the strange text from Harper, the disturbed porch light, the motion alert that showed nothing, the officer's pen clicked faster. Every detail I'd dismissed suddenly mattered. Every small red flag I had brushed aside sat under their flashlight like evidence waiting to be connected. They walked me to the back of one of their trucks to show me additional items recovered from my basement. I braced myself, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Coiled ropes, rolls of tape, a set of knives, each one wrapped and labeled. A small camcorder still powered on its red light, blinking as if it had been recording until the moment they seized it. A hand-drawn layout of my house with notes marking my usual arrival times over several weeks. And a journal with lines written in tight, obsessive handwriting. "Friday night is best. Don't make the same mistake twice. He gets home late." It felt like stepping into someone else's nightmare, except every piece of it was tied directly to my life. I steadied myself against the truck, struggling to understand who would go to this length. The officer beside me opened a folder with the man's ID. My stomach flipped when I saw the name. He'd been a seasonal worker at the airport, someone I must have walked past a dozen times without a second thought. We never exchanged more than a nod, but he knew my shifts, my habits, the hours I slept. He had been close enough to memorize me without ever speaking to me. The deeper the police dug, the worse it became. They found shoe prints in the basement that didn't match his. They found disturbed soil behind my property where someone had pitched a small tent at some point, now long gone. They found no fingerprints except his wiped surfaces everywhere else. Someone had planned carefully. Someone had been patient. Someone had used him as a tool. He wasn't the mastermind. He was a follower. And whoever was behind him understood routines better than I ever could. The officer pulled something from a sealed bag, a USB drive taken from the intruder's jacket. When they plugged it in, the audio inside was short, muffled, but unmistakable. A man I didn't recognize spoke my full name, my exact address, instructions, a countdown. And then at the end, a command to wait in the basement until I came home. Hearing my name in that stranger's voice made my skin crawl. It wasn't random, it wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate, long-term, and terrifyingly personal. I stood there in the cold night air, realizing this had begun long before the phone call from my father, long before the lights of the police cruisers painted my street. Someone had been moving pieces around me, quietly calculating the perfect night to trap me inside my own home. And I was only just beginning to understand how deep this went. I tried calling my dad for hours, dialing until my thumb ached, but every attempt went straight to voicemail. It didn't matter if it was 1 in the morning or 3. His phone never turned off. Not once in my entire life. That alone was enough to send a chill through me, but the memory of his shaking voice, the sound of something slamming into his door right before the call dropped, made my chest tighten until it hurt. Something had happened to him and I didn't know what. When I called my mother back, her voice was frayed with fear. She told me he'd run out of the house earlier in a state she'd never seen before, no explanation, no jacket, no hesitation. She kept repeating that he received a strange message, looked terrified, and sprinted out like he was chasing or running from something. My sister Willa called minutes later, sounding equally panicked. She said Dad looked pale and shaken, like whatever he saw on his phone wasn't just alarming, it was catastrophic. Neither of them knew anything more. The only constant was the same message he'd given me: I couldn't go home. The police, meanwhile, were becoming increasingly interested in him. They asked to check his phone activity, wanting to know if he'd received threats, if he knew anything about the intruder, or if he'd been involved in the situation before it reached my house. When they tried to ping his device, they got nothing. No signal. No last known location. The phone had been turned off completely. Anyone else could dismiss that as coincidence, but not with my dad. He didn't let his battery drop below 60%. He charged it every night before bed. The silence of his device wasn't normal. It was frightening. Then Mrs. Kate, still shaken from everything she'd witnessed, approached the officers and quietly told them something she hadn't yet shared. She said that earlier, around the same time she heard noises from my basement, she'd also heard footsteps upstairs. Not one pair. 2. Heavy steps, light steps. Different rhythms. That meant there may have been 2 people inside my home using different levels of the house. But the police only pulled out 1 man. Whoever else had been there was gone. That revelation unsettled the officers visibly, and it tore open a new fear inside me. If 2 people were inside my home and only 1 had been caught, then someone with access, someone who knew the house, someone who knew my routines well enough to hide, had slipped away before anyone arrived. Just when I thought my nerves couldn't fray any further, the police found something that made everything worse. A patrol officer approached me with a sober expression and said they'd located my dad's truck. It was parked only a few minutes' walk from my house. The doors were unlocked. The engine was cold. The keys were still in the ignition. My dad would never abandon his truck like that. If he were truly in danger, he would have driven straight to the station or straight to me. Leaving it there meant only one thing: he got out or was taken out before he could go any farther. My mind spiraled. Did he arrive before the police? Did he walk into something he wasn't supposed to see? Did the people who'd been inside my house know he was coming? Every answer that formed in my head only raised more questions, and each one was darker than the last. And then Harper called. Her voice shook so violently I could barely understand her at first. She said someone had left an envelope at her door. Inside was a single piece of paper with 1 sentence written in uneven black ink. He almost made it home tonight. She swore the handwriting wasn't my dad's. The letter gave her such a bad feeling that she locked every door and window before calling me. Hearing her fear only made mine grow. By the time the officers finished their initial sweep, one truth sat heavy and undeniable: my father was missing. The man in custody was only one part of a larger plan. Whoever had been inside my house wasn't working alone. And the sinking realization hit me: this wasn't just about me anymore. My father had been dragged into something he'd seen coming long before I did. Something that had already swallowed him whole. By morning, the police asked me to return to the temporary command center they'd set up near Crescent Hill. They wanted a more extensive interview, and said they had information I needed to hear. Inside a cramped room beneath harsh fluorescent lighting, they played the audio extracted from the USB they'd found on the intruder. The voice that filled the space wasn't the intruder's. It was deeper calm rehearsed. A man giving orders. He mentioned my street, my basement, and my name with a confidence that made my stomach clench. He told the man to wait, told him not to act too soon, told him I would arrive alone. Hearing another person speak about me like that, like I wasn't human, just a target, made the air in the room feel too thin to breathe. One of the detectives noted that the voice sounded oddly similar to a distorted version of the system notifications I occasionally received at work. Those glitches I'd brushed off as tech malfunctions. Realization hit hard. Those weren't glitches. Someone had looped his voice into the system to test how it would sound coming through airport speakers. Someone had been close enough to manipulate internal equipment without being noticed. When they opened the rest of the files, my knees nearly gave out. There were video clips captured from inside the airport some months old. Footage of me walking through maintenance halls, unlocking storage rooms. Most of the shots came from angles above head height angles that weren't from official security cameras. Whoever filmed them had stood just behind vents, ceiling panels, or machinery I rarely inspected. I felt nauseous realizing that this man or someone working with him had likely been within feet of me countless times, close enough to touch me if he wanted to. And I had never noticed. The police continued digging, moving deeper into the part of the story that involved my father. They had searched his house earlier that morning and found his phone submerged in the kitchen sink water still running. It looked intentional, like he'd tried to destroy evidence or hide something on it. Everything else in the kitchen was untouched. No signs of struggle. No overturned furniture. Just the phone drowned. My mother had cried when they told her. She had no idea why he would do that. Neither did I. The only explanation that made sense was that he'd known someone might come for him and he didn't want them finding whatever was on that device. They kept going, and what they uncovered next shifted the ground under me again. In my father's office, inside a locked drawer, they found case notes about a man who had gone missing from the airport district last year. A worker who often stayed late, a man I vaguely remembered seeing once or twice. The last person he was seen talking to was someone from the same seasonal staff the intruder belonged to. Seeing the missing man's photo made my throat tighten. I recognized him instantly. His face had been barely visible in a blurry photo among the pile pulled from my basement. It wasn't random. It wasn't misplaced. It was part of a pattern my father had been piecing together without ever telling us. Standing there in that room, staring at the notes, I realized my dad had been investigating long before tonight. Maybe he'd been trying to protect me by staying silent. Maybe he thought he could stop whatever was happening before it reached my door. Or maybe he never expected how far the people behind this would go. The detectives continued discussing leads, but I couldn't focus anymore. All I could think about was how deep this ran, how long it had been growing quietly around me. My father wasn't missing at random. He was missing because he knew too much, because he was close to exposing something that thrived in the shadows of routine and familiarity, something that had decided I was next. As I sat there drowning in thoughts, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered cautiously, expecting nothing more than background noise. But what I heard sent every hair on my arms straight up. There was breathing, slow, deliberate, like someone wanted me to hear it. I almost hung up, but before I could, a voice whispered through the static. "Don't trust anyone. Not even them." The line crackled, the voice warping like it was coming through a damaged radio. It sounded like my father, or someone trying to sound like him. I shouted his name, asked where he was, begged him to speak again. But the line cut abruptly, leaving only silence. I stared at my phone, pulse thundering, realizing that whatever force had taken my father wasn't done. Not with him, not with me. The police told me they would update me when appropriate, but the way they avoided my questions after the strange call that sounded like my father made something inside me snap. Their explanations felt rehearsed, evasive. They insisted they couldn't verify whether the voice was real, whether the call was staged, or whether it even came from within the city. Every answer felt like a deflection. Every glance between officers made me feel like there was something they didn't want me to see. I stopped relying on them after that moment. If I wanted answers, real answers, I needed to start looking on my own. So I went back to the house once they cleared the immediate danger, walking through the rooms that no longer felt like mine. The photos recovered from the basement were spread out on the kitchen table under police lighting. I picked through them carefully. Some were shots of me driving. Others were taken through my windows. But a few were from angles that didn't make sense, angles too high to be from any normal vantage point. It looked like someone had installed something in the vents or ceiling panels. That realization hit me in the chest. I hadn't been watched for a few weeks. This had been going on far longer, maybe a year or more. One picture caught my attention. A blurred edge. A reflection in a metal cabinet behind me. A hand. A ring. A very specific ring. I recognized the design instantly. It belonged to the senior maintenance division at the airport, the same ring issued only to a small group of high-security technicians with clearance into rooms most people never see. And among that group was a man who once argued with my father about the missing worker last year. A man who avoided my eyes every time I passed him. I knew then I couldn't wait. I drove to the airport in the middle of the night, used my badge, walked through the dimly lit corridors to the technical wing, the place most employees never have a reason to enter. My footsteps echoed through the long hall. Doors locked behind me automatically. The silence felt heavier than usual. I went to the room I suspected had been used for surveillance. I unscrewed a vent cover and found tool marks on the screws that didn't match my work. Someone had removed and replaced them multiple times. They had been watching me from inside my own workplace. Behind the vent on the duct wall was a small device taped and wired neatly into place. It wasn't a camera. It was a transmitter, something designed to intercept sound and send it somewhere else. On the side was a serial code. The same one I'd seen on the USB the intruder carried. That meant the same group watching me from my basement was watching me from here too. Same operation, same people, same intention. That was when the lights flickered. A subtle shift, but enough to make me freeze. Then a voice crackled through the old intercom speaker above me. Calm, measured. The same voice from the recordings on the USB. Finally seeing the pattern, aren't you? I turned toward the far end of the hall. A silhouette stood there, cloaked in the dim emergency lights, just enough to see the outline of a man, but not his face. My heart slammed against my ribs. I called out to him, demanding to know where my father was. He answered without hesitation, too curious for his own good. That's what happens to men who don't stay in their lane. He paused. He saw something he wasn't meant to see. So we had to postpone our plans for you. Hearing him speak so casually about my father's disappearance made something inside me burn. I stepped back, trying to calculate the distance to the security door behind me, but he must have noticed. He laughed softly and pointed upward toward one of the cameras. Don't bother. I can see you. I've always seen you. You're predictable, Daxon. That's why you were chosen. He stepped forward enough for the dim light to reveal the ring on his finger. The same ring from the reflection. You live alone. You go to work the same way every day. You stay late. You don't let people close. You're perfect for what we do. My stomach turned. What is it you do? He didn't answer directly. We document fear, he said. We record the moment someone realizes they've lost control. The moment they understand they were never as safe as they believed. He planned to film my capture. Film whatever they intended to do to me. And the only reason it didn't happen was because I stopped for gas. The hall went abruptly dark except for red emergency lights. I ran. He must have anticipated it because each turn I made, a door locked, a camera swiveled, a siren beeped quietly overhead. He was using the airport's internal system against me. He had access to everything. I forced myself through a maintenance hatch and down into a lower hallway where I knew cameras were limited. I could still hear his voice echoing faintly through the intercom system. Run if you want. I already know where you'll go. But he didn't know the older layout. The parts of the building my team had remodeled and rerouted. The place's only long-term staff remembered. I cut through a storage corridor and reached the security room and froze. My father was tied to a chair inside, bruised but breathing. I rushed to him. He managed to lift his head and whisper my name. The walls around him were covered with maps, photos of me, annotated routes showing my routine for the past 2 years. Every grocery run, every drive, every late shift. I stared at it all, barely able to process how someone had tracked me so completely without ever being seen. My father's voice was weak, but clear enough. It's bigger than you think, he said. Bigger than both of us. And as I cut the ropes from his wrists, I realized he was right. Whatever this was, it went far beyond one man hiding in the shadows. This was organized, structured, and terrifyingly thorough. Once my father was free enough to stand, he pulled me close and told me everything he had been hiding. He had been looking into disappearances near the airport for half a year. Men who worked late, men who lived alone, men who kept to themselves, all vanishing without a trace, leaving almost nothing behind except a few overlapping patterns no one noticed except him. He followed the clues quietly, hoping to uncover something before alerting anyone. He never told me because he didn't want me caught in the middle of whatever he'd stumbled into. But it was already too late by the time he realized the disappearances weren't isolated. They were coordinated. He also told me he'd encountered the man leading this group once before. They had crossed paths when Dad questioned an employee about the missing worker. The man had stared at him too long, unblinking, as if memorizing his face. Dad sensed something was wrong immediately, but before he could pursue it further, the man vanished. From that moment, Dad knew he was being watched. And when he received a message the night everything unfolded, one that said, "Tonight your son won't make it home," he ran out the door without thinking. Before we could move farther down the hall, the voice came again, this time louder, closer, echoing from a speaker overhead. Then he stepped out from the shadows near the emergency exit, holding a weapon and triggering the lockdown sequence with a small device in his hand. Metal bolts slid into place around the doors. Lights dimmed. The temperature in the hall dropped as the ventilation slowed. He didn't approach immediately. He wanted us trapped, wanted the fear to simmer. He spoke calmly, even gently, telling us he wanted to capture what terror looked like between a father and son realizing the end was coming. He said he'd filmed others before, said he'd been planning ours longer than any of them. But his need for drama cost him time. It let me position myself between him and my father and calculate my next move. Just when I lunged toward him, another figure emerged from the control room, tall, masked, moving deliberately. He wore the same uniform-style boots as the man who'd been dragged out of my house. And on his hand was that ring again, gleaming faintly under the emergency lights. The resemblance to my own build, my own posture, was unnerving. He moved like someone who had studied me, mimicked me. In the flickering red light, I couldn't tell which one was giving orders and which one was obeying. They circled us each step, pushing me back into the narrowest part of the hall. The masked one lunged first, forcing me into a hand-to-hand fight that dragged us across the floor. Years of Marine training kept me alive in that moment, letting me anticipate his movements, counter his strikes, and use the tight space to my advantage. But every time I got the upper hand, the other man adjusted something in the room, lights, locks, alarms, trying to disorient me. It felt like fighting inside a trap built specifically for me. But then something unexpected happened. A loud metallic crash echoed down the corridor, followed by shouted commands. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Police stormed the wing. Not because of anything I did, but because Harper had contacted them. The letter she received terrified her enough to forward everything to a detective, my father's message, the envelope, the handwriting. The police traced the signal from the transmitter I found earlier, and it led them straight to the airport's restricted wing. They breached the doors just in time. One of the attackers was tackled and restrained. The masked one fled through a maintenance tunnel and vanished before anyone could stop him. Right before disappearing, he turned, once pointed at me, and said, "This isn't finished." In the aftermath, the officers uncovered records, masks, journals, and files hidden throughout the room, enough to link the group to at least 5 disappearances over the past 3 years. All men with lives like mine, isolated, predictable, easy to study from a distance. The purpose of it all remained unclear, but the evidence suggested something ritualistic, something methodical and obsessive. My father and I were taken to the hospital and kept for observation. He apologized more than once for keeping the investigation from me, but I understood why. He was trying to protect me from a threat he still didn't fully understand. A threat that proved far more organized than either of us imagined. When I was finally cleared to leave and return to the temporary place the police arranged for me, I found a plain white envelope slipped under the door. No stamps, no markings. Inside was a single photograph of me standing in the airport weeks ago, taken from a height I didn't recognize. A viewpoint I never saw a person standing in. On the back, written in the same uneven letters Harper described, were 3 words: "See you soon."